Oh, looking at that load. Hello and welcome once again to Wandering Monster, the Monster Manual of Podcast and America's Test Table. I am John Baltusberger.
I am Charles R. Bernard.
Hi, I'm Ian Servas.
I'm Mr. Paschke.
And everyone can be heard, which is lovely. No one's muted. There's not weird music going on other than the stuff inside my skull. Hello, everyone. If the four of us, well, the three of them look run down. I look run down. You just can't see me. It's because Ian and I have decided to create a fully fledged tabletop RPG in a month, which was stupid, but we're doing it. Mr. Paschke was injured in a Tyrannosaurus shootout.
Yeah, it was vicious. So small guns, small
Nice.
hands, but big
Nice.
guns. So you think about a T-Rex.
Both hands just to hold.
Yeah, it mechanically worked.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
Charles
Well, it's got like a
Charles
backstrap.
Charles Bernard's body is still acclimating to the nanobots they have put inside his bloodstream.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the government or the QAnon people. Maybe both.
So we are here. Look, last week we had an amazing time playing the Troika module, the Ruinous Palace of Metegorgos. And this week, or rather part of this week, half of this week, we are going to be discussing that experience. So I'm going to get that ball rolling by asking Ian. You had to generate characters for us, had to read the whole module, had to familiarize yourself with, the setting and the system and all this. How did you feel about how did you feel about it from a mechanics point of view?
I really like Troika, and it's something that I've run multiple times, especially for people who have the Numinous edition. The Black Mage and Thistle in the back is a fantastic adventure. So it was something very familiar. It was a nice welcome return to running Troika. Because it's been a spell since I've run right and proper game. It's interesting, though, I will say, because the Kickstarter that is on now has a BX or OSE version, or Old School Essential for people who know all the acronyms, as well as Troika. And it made me think a lot about how differently the game would naturalistically play in a different system. Because Troika, I think, it definitely opens itself to more discourse and dialogue and more gonzo thinking, versus I think if you put the players in a BX or in a D&D like setting, they might have a different approach, because a lot of at least newer school D&D is very combat oriented, and there's a lot of murder hobo-ness and other elements out of the box thinking with old school play. So kind of made me wonder, how would one be predisposed to interacting, especially with the Ash zombies. From a flavor standpoint, I think that the game is very interesting for one who reads it, there's a very strong mythopoetic feeling to the material. And some of the descriptions are very vague, especially inside the palace. And initially, I almost found it frustrating, where I wanted to know, is this thing adjacent to this? Or where is this in relationship to that? But I leaned into that and realized that there's so much loss and longing in this module that the concreteness of the world it's almost a little bit abstract. Almost like the movie or book Annihilation, how there's a lot of fuzziness about what is reality, what is the shared sorrowscape, as it were, of Metegorgos, and what is my relationship as a GM leading players through that experience. And that really kind of changed the experience for me. But it'll be very interesting once people read it, especially the extended backstory and myth in the back of the book, and what they take away of it as both GM and those who play it.
Interesting.
So, that's a lot of context, but then I'll turn that question around from a player perspective. What are your experiences like in Troika, since I think all of you are new to the system, and I guess let's just start with that. And if you had to recommend this, would you recommend Troika to someone who's never played it?
I'll jump in there. So yeah, this was my first time playing the Troika system, and I had a blast. It was like a nice combination of crunch and simplicity, which I thought was kind of brilliant. That's most of the play is with like 1d6, and yet there's enough complexity to make things interesting. The skill dynamic led to, like you said, a lot of creativity, a lot of like lateral thinking, and we've got to be the only people to have done a pacifist like playthrough one time of this game, which definitely shows that we were doing some lateral thinking. I liked it. John, what about you?
So, just speaking from a mechanical point of view for a minute, right? Troika is a game that I needed to see someone else run before I would feel comfortable running it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I feel that way a lot of the times. Powered by the Apocalypse, for instance, I had no idea how one would play or run that until I watched the Adventure Zone, the McElroy brothers play it, and then I was like, oh, okay, I see the with that thing, like the play follows, or rather the mechanics follow the play rather than the play kind of being hedged in the mechanics. Whereas Troika, things feel fairly side by side. One of the things I like about um, the newer school of thought in game design is the freedom of flavor to touch on mechanics. For instance, there's nothing mechanically that said I could just create water, or that water would put me in touch with my deity, or that my deity would have any kind of sway or touch on anything, or even that my deity existed. That was all flavor that we created kind of on the spot, which then had mechanical game effects, which is something I really love as a player. We've talked about it a lot on this show. I'm almost allergic to a lot of the games that we grew up with, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, any kind of game that you where like theory crafting is a component. I immediately just like, well, I suck at this, so I'm not going to enjoy this game. Whereas a game like Troika has this really cool balance of interesting mechanics, like the chaos of battle where you don't know when you're going to go, but if you're going to go, you're going to go twice, you're going to go once. You might like, because of the randomness of it, you could theoretically go 6 times in a row and no one else gets to go. It's really a crazy system that I really have a lot. I got a lot of affection for very quickly. And I know I'm going on, and I apologize. I read this rulebook, the Troika rulebook, originally on my flight to New Orleans, while my eardrums were rupturing. Which is a crazy thing to say. When I got home, I ordered the Numinous edition because it's gorgeous. It's such a pretty book, and I'm really kind of enamored with the system. It's this blend of loose flavor, cool mechanics, and random chaos that really just makes me very happy.
It's definitely something that is good when you have yes and role players.
Yeah.
If you are crunch heavy, you're not going to really have as good time because there's not that strong structure to really reinforce a solid, like a Pathfinder experience per se. What about you, Mr. Paschke? You were under the influence of lots of drugs and were suffering.
Yeah. So as you guys are going over this, I'm remembering more about the game, which I did not realize how out of it I really was. I had privately messaged Ian before we played. I was like, hey, look, if you can find someone else to jump in, I'm not going to be upset. I'll do it. So there's that fourth person. But man, yeah. I remember that I don't like butterflies anymore as a rhino. I didn't realize that was the thing that I was going to have a prejudice against, but you know, they're meant to be charged. Short spears are best spears. And yeah, it was I recall it being an enjoyable experience. But
your
yeah,
little hat really made it for me. That's what I enjoyed. Just a little bitty helmet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for seeding that in there, Ian.
Hey, that was standard in the book. Like John was saying, there's a lot of flavor there for you to latch on to, and yes, and to greatness.
Yeah, I don't think Rules Nazi would really like this mechanically speaking, because it's thick enough, but it's not gonna like it's like a nice sauce where it'll go with your dish, it'll make things tasty, but it's not going to overpower it where it's like, oh, did I have chicken in that? I don't know. It just tasted like this purple thing. Purple doesn't have a flavor.
Well, speaking of purple things, what as a player, what were your experiences in this? So for people who may not have watched the live stream, we got through about 2/3 of the material in the adventure. I would have wished we could have almost had more time to go into some of the really interesting parts as we get closer and closer to Metegorgos' lair. But we did hit a lot of some of the major elements that you could work with and expand or contract based on your time. Us having 2 hours, that's a real short window. So I hope it wasn't rushed at all, but who would like to maybe just discuss about what maybe some of your favorite elements were, or what your takeaway was as a player playing through the actual module itself?
Man, I was on a killing spree. It was like the exact opposite of my experience with Yigdera, where like I was a sniper who couldn't hit shit. And in this case, I was a guy with like an iron croquet mallet who was just like wrecking the place. It was marvelous. So that was a lot of fun. And also, like, I'm glad you used the word mythopoetic so that I don't feel like an asshole, because I'm going to say it too. And now neither one of us are assholes. But yeah,
I mean, like debatable.
Yeah. But touching on some of the like Greco-Roman material in a original way, in a way that kind of flips the narrative, I thought was cool, and that made for a great atmospheric experience. Kind of felt like I could feel the vibe of the place, which is, speaks well to Metegorgos as a, as something you can get on Kickstarter and still back, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and yes, you can. Until April 20th. Ooh, until 420.
Ooh,
that's a good way to remember it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, what about you? What about you, Charles Patchke?
Do you remember anything? Or did that Rhino Firkin beer really?
I remember.
Yeah,
there was beer, wasn't there? Yeah. I'm surprised at how much I don't actually remember, because I wasn't drinking anything. So it's like, normally it's like, okay, things are fuzzy. Why? Well, you had 3 or 4 beers before you did this. That would make sense. No, I went to the doctor and they were like, take these. Okay, I'll take these. And yeah,
it was a truly magical experience for Paschke.
My favorite part with you, Paschke, was when you had rolled this random die that was given to you by these tiny petrified gnome characters. And it was literally a head, and you got a critical success on your gambling roll despite not knowing anything about the game whatsoever. You rolled a nat 1, basically, critical failure to identify the game. And you nonchalantly just said, heads. Like, it was just one of those great moments. You should go back and listen to the recording. We can discover moments.
I should have done that today.
It's all good. It was a lot of fun to be a bystander for that particular bout of stone gnome gambling.
What about you, John? Like in combat, you had the most amount of actions, for example. Definitely, Shump had a lot of agency in this one, which was really fun.
Shump had a lot of agency. His card or whatever bead got drawn a lot. And it's interesting because I always choose my class based on flavor. Like every time. I chose the goblin for Yadera because he was a cook and I love cooking. I chose the befouler of ponds because I really like frogs and toads. Side note, did you know that the English are fucking toad crazy?
Here, I thought you were going to start bringing in the fact that we have this great music license from Bog Wizard.
Oh, I will say, we need to make sure this is for our viewers, but also for us. We need to, every week, every episode, we need to give credit where credit is due. Our intro and outro music is Barbaria from the band Bog Wizard off the album. Oh, God. Miasmic Purple Fog.
I was going to say it's the purple one. Yeah,
it's the purple one. I have that coming on vinyl and I'm so excited.
It's a fucking banger. Yeah.
And
if you don't have a record player, you can also find them on Spotify. Just look for Bog Wizard.
iTunes. They also
follow
have
that
cassettes.
shit because they are fucking great.
They just came out with an album. This is the last plug for them, I promise. This
I'd
episode.
love to get either Bog Wizard or Frog Lord as a guest in our. So if you're,
I will talk to them. That is actually possible. But sorry. My day job is just now messaging me. But the Frog Lord and Bog Wizard teamed up to do a split album called Frog Wizard versus the Bog Lord, or Bog Wizard versus the Frog Lord, a frog in a bog, and it's fucking fire. Anyway, I really like toads. I really like frogs. I really like swamps and mucus and scum and alligators, and like I've always just had this like romanticized view of the malaria and yellow fever ridden parts of our world. And so like I knew I wanted to do that. And then you're like, by the way, this is super serious and kind of a downer. And I was like, okay, so I have to play this a little more less silly. Which is like one shots, which is what we do on this show, right? We do one shots. Maybe that will change, but I can't see it changing because we have a lot of games to play and a lot of people to test stuff for.
It would have to depend on our schedule. We'd have to have like a huge gap in,
I just like I said, I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
One shots give themselves over to being silly and to being over the top. So playing it more toned down, more reasonable, was a cool challenge for a one shot. And I have a lot of emotions about the legend of Medusa and the Gorgon. It's a horrifying story.
Yep.
If you are not aware, and a content warning essay, if that's not something you are comfortable hearing about, maybe skip ahead 5 minutes, come back in 5 minutes, or we'll see you next week. A lot of women get a tattoo of Medusa's head to signify that they are survivors of SA. If you are non-familiar with Medusa, she was cursed by a goddess, and she was cursed as punishment for getting raped. Like, it's a shitty story. It's a horrifying story. And I, like...
It's far from the worst one in Ovid's Metamorphoses. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I don't... but, like... it's like that is the feeling that permeated my soul while we were playing this. You know what I mean? Like that is the mythos that I was keeping in my heart, and the knowledge that I was trying to keep in mind of like, okay, how should I broach this as a character who is spiritually aware enough to be connected to and have empathy for, like, monsters are created.
Can I add on to that, John?
Always.
So something interesting, if you haven't really looked at the Kickstarter or have had a copy of the book so far, in this latest edition, the art itself actually really does focus on this feminist perspective of, like you're saying, of this Gorgon, of the Medusa. The art itself has this mixture of that Greek. I'm trying to think of I'm going back to my Hellenistic arts days, and I'm failing at the name of the term, but that Greek style of art to display the mythos, that you have these images of vulvas, of the feminine form, the divine, the feminine divine is manifest in the imagery, and it's very powerful and evocative. And actually, even on our first talking points about the show, I tried to pick art that didn't really have that, just in case of like Twitch censors or whatnot, because I mean it's very overt, and I think that's really important that you touched on that, John, to talk about those elements that we gloss over, and when we talk about art from and mythos from a modern perspective, we sometimes forget about those poignant lessons, those poignant stories. And Metegorgos really focuses on the divine feminine, and it was really haunting and powerful reading it. I'm really curious for people to read it and look at their own trauma and through this lens, and also the historic and mythopoetic lens as well. But I digress. I mean, anyone else want to add on to that, or experiences dealing with that, or you can resume where you were, John.
What I want to say is that I think anyone who's played role-playing games seriously, and by seriously I mean they've had like weekly games that last for years, or game groups that last for years, right? People that they are close to, that they get this bond with. I think that we've all had moments where, because of where a story went, we had to deal with something. And you know, these days we have X rules, we have veils and lines, and I hope that makes the community safer and more comfortable, and I hope that it doesn't ever stand in the way of some of the frankly shocking amount of healing that can go down with a good group of friends. Or if it does, that they encounter that healing in another place, another way. You know, for cis white dudes who have at least the crossing appearance of being hetero, may not be the perfect group to truly lift this story up into an audience to where it could be. But
that doesn't mean we felt excluded from it.
No, not at all. What I guess what I'm saying is that I see a true opportunity for really beautiful moments in this module. That I look forward to hearing about.
I think, if anything, it's important that you bring up like the cis white male, privileged perspective, and if anything, too, that demographic probably really needs that type of lesson more than anything, to confront that loss and trauma that they are usually sheltered from due to their privilege. I mean, it's a good teachable moment. And perhaps, too, that's also the importance of the elements that are behind the screen, behind the veils in the book that talk about that raw trauma through the mythopoetic lens. I know I'm going to say the word mythopoetic much, but that is the important word. What makes this such a distinctive experience and module, because it is brief. It's very brief, but there is a ton of content. There's almost as much content in lore as there is actual encounters, because I think you could, like you're saying, John, use this for a teachable moment to work through trauma, to explore sometimes uncomfortable elements, and having that framework of something like Troika, for example, that really lends itself to mutual storytelling. There can be sharing of grief, or the experiencing of grief that you've never encountered personally. And that's truly healing and enlightening and empowering.
Yeah, we're happy to be able to contribute to the success of the module in any way, because I think more people should play this. I think that yeah, it needs to get out there, because there's a lot to chew on. It's full of extremely. I mean, I read not as much as the GM, but I read a fair piece into the manual, and it's extremely fascinating reading and a fascinating setting. A little on the gloomy side, so it's not, like John said, it's not for funny, wacky one shots. But if you're looking for something that digs into this material in a mythopoetic way, I think this is an excellent module.
Let me jump in there, Charles, real quick, and just say that I think that a intimate group, and we're an intimate group, like there's 4 of us, we're a small group. I think an intimate group that isn't being broadcast to the entire fucking internet, including the creators, including other designers and friends. I think this would be a fantastic one-shot, because we got through 2/3 of it. Imagine if it was you and some close friends sitting down with some wine, juice, tea, even. Oh, some good oolong tea. And just like playing this from start to finish in like 4 hours. I think it could be a really, really cool experience. It just our venue is not one that is normally given over to poignant self-reflection as much as it is poignant taint ripping.
I would like to interject with 2 quick points, if I may. One being, as you're saying, this importance of having that type of storytelling with an intimate group. One of our upcoming broadcasts will be a Jag Dragon and Possum Creek. The creators there, they're releasing another fantastically crowdsourced game, Yazba's Bed and Breakfast, which talks about that type of experience. There's poignant, slice of life, compassionate game that it's hard for us in a shorter time window to really convey. And I would say to my second point that even though, like you were saying, Charles, that this is a gloomy game or very poignant, but you quickly latched on to some of those and treated it, even if it's in a lighthearted way, those matters very seriously. I mean, Pashki, if you remember or not, you quickly identified that what could have been a very hostile figure with this ash zombie was a figure that really just needed compassion. And you brought it up first, almost at first as like an offhand comment of surely this can't be what motivates something that seems to do is destruction, but that was the solution. And you applied that to would have been 34 other counts of zombies you would have encountered that would have been just a needless slog, and like maybe perhaps a D&D perspective. That's just a little bit personal bias. But most of the encounters, you brought in a serious action that had really good outcomes. Even the kind of the bizarre encounter of the cholera demons or those Escrita demons, where you had shown
the ones that I beat the shit out of.
True, but then you also were turning it into like where you were doing that, you were also releasing a bit of this curse. You were putting a foothold of a better source of divine in this very accursed place. I think we did well in storytelling, considering that we've had in our previous game experiences, we've been much more We should probably retire the term murder hobo because there's a lot of unpleasant connotations. So we've got to figure out a way to workshop that. But
I agree.
violence forward approach, you divorced yourself of that, and you had fantastic outcomes. And probably, if you did engage in violence as a primary thing, we wouldn't even gotten that very far in the adventure whatsoever.
So,
Yeah.
let me first say my intention is never to play a kill everyone character. Even Ravioli, who was obviously deranged,
just like his inspiration. Yeah.
He would have been extremely happy to have not had to hurt anyone. He just was a sociopath and was like, okay, well, this is the easiest way forward now. That said, let's talk about our favorite moment. One moment that stood out from all the rest. I'm going to go first. My favorite moment in the game is when you asked me, Ian, do you mean it?
Mm-hmm. I loved that.
Because
that seemed to catch you off guard a little bit. Like I felt like you had to really think about your motivation of your character and you as a player. Like that was kind of an interesting. I could hear gears clicking.
Yeah, well, that was the point. Is that like, so y'all? I mean, I think Charles, you know this. I don't think either of our two newer friends know this. I was an actor. Like I was a professional actor for years. Film, stage. My most recent role, I worked with Lemons, who used to be one of our co-hosts. But like character motivation, and as a writer, character motivation is everything. And I say it all the time as a writer. I say like, okay, characters don't have minds of their own. You write a good character and you follow the motivation you gave them, and then that's how they behave. And so when you asked me that question, I said, okay, I haven't spent much time with I can't even Shump. Thank you. I haven't spent any time with Shump. I only know that he is like essentially a swamp. Like he essentially worships Swamp Thing and wants to protect the like slimy areas. Okay, why does he want to do that? Okay, how would that apply in this situation? Okay. Again, going on the Swamp Thing, like these things would essentially represent the rot. They are essentially trapped in the rot and they don't want to be. How painful is that? How would my character feel about that? And so when you ask me, there's a metagame component, right? Because I, as a player, knew that the right answer to win, quote unquote, is yes. But I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to say like, well, this is the win. Like, because fuck winning in an RPG. It's about having fun and telling a cool story.
Mm-hmm.
So the questions I had is, okay, am I saying yes because it's like what will get us further? Am I saying, okay, yes, my character would actually mean this. Secondary question, will that make for the best story? Will that make for the best TV, for lack of a better word? So it was a really cool moment that forced me to delve deeper into my character than I had. And that's why it's my one of my favorite moments from last week's game.
My favorite moment involved John's character, Shump, or what have you. The most creative use of the drown spell that I think I've ever seen, casting it on himself so that he can just vomit endless streams of filthy swamp water full of like snails and leeches on the lips. By the way, Ian, was a beautiful touch. That whole sequence was just amazing.
I would really love if anyone listens to this and is like, I should do some Wandering Monster fan art. If you can draw me vomiting gallons upon gallons of swamp water
Little
out
frog
into a hole,
just going full exorcism.
Don't forget a nail being stuck in the throat.
Yeah, I would. It would make me so happy.
And what about you, Pashki? What do you recall from your drug haze? Were there any things that stood out that you remember, or is it all a blur?
So I remember the vomiting and wondering, could the vomiting be, since we determined that drowning via like projectile vomit of water, could that have been casted on the creatures at the bottom to make them like shoot out water as well? Sorry, that was just a thing in my head at the time that has now been jarred and brought back, and I kept comparing it to the sizes of fish tanks in volume. So it's like he vomited out a gallon, 5-gallon tank, 7-gallon fish tank. Because that's where my brain was at.
I love drugs. That's just great.
Thanks, doctors.
I have such a good soundbite to put on our socials now.
Hey, man, that I stand by what I said.
What were you going to say, Pashki?
I don't know if I have a good, like, solid, cohesive memory to say, like, my favorite part was this. Because as you guys keep telling me more about what we did, it's just like, oh, yeah, we did do that. That was good.
Yeah, no, like, I really like Reginald's voice and character. Like, at the very beginning, first zombie, you're like, you're not going to get any friends with it behaving like that when you attempt to stab him in the face with a spear. It just was perfect. If I had known that you were actually not even cogent, I think that would have made it even that much better. Like, if you were almost like a senile Rhino Man, far past his prime, just struggling with dementia, I almost would have added another layer to that. That each moment was singular, in its own clarity.
It's like watching someone who's blackout drunk
just
play the piano beautifully,
Yeah.
I immediately am thinking of the TV show Community, or Chevy Chase's character. It's just, I feel like that could have been him.
One of my favorite moments is talking about you wanting to stab this zombie in the face. Charles just said, face is a good place to stab. And, re-listening to the recording, I thought that was hysterical.
Another statement that I stand by.
Yeah. All of you have such good zingers. At some point, we need to just write them down. So if anyone's a listener and you've got good sound bites, post them in our YouTube or post them on Twitch
or our Facebook.
It is helpful because sometimes we forget what we say.
Our new Facebook.
Yeah, our new Facebook.
Yeah.
I
will say I desperately want and I might commission Roland Coons because we're going to do Orkborg at some point. And Roland Coons draws goblins like there's no tomorrow. I may commission a Wandering Monster shirt of Ravioli saying it's for your health.
See, that you should get that, but Caleb should do that by right.
That's
does
fair.
fantastic art too.
That's fair.
And make shirts. So just a plug.
What if it's a Caleb goblin sword fighting Ravioli, or rather Caleb doing Ravioli sword fighting a Orkborg orc while screaming it's for your health.
The other thing I was just going to say is in one of our other upcoming streams, which is this Wednesday, we will be doing Wayne Roberts' Dungeon Plumbers. One of the classes that's in there is the Gut Rot Gourmand, which is basically a sewer version of what Ravioli was. So I could fully see Ravioli versus whatever this character is, because I'll make pre-gen, so you'll insert a name.
I'm probably going to be a much less psychotic version of whatever it is. Anyway,
you heard it here first, folks.
Less psychotic. It's my promise.
Breaking news.
We have okay. Are there any closing thoughts on Troika or Metegorgos?
Just thanks to the creators for letting us play their game. It was a lot of fun. I very much enjoyed myself, and I would highly recommend it.
And if someone is in the chat and they have a question and they've been holding on to it, by all means, now is a perfect time to ask it as we're in the end. We keep bouncing between like 2 and 3 people like actively viewing it. So I'm wondering like who's like logging in like, crap, that person's still there and like logging up. But if you have a question for us, pop it in the chat.
So, what I'll say is shortly before we ran this, I went ahead and ordered the I ordered one. I went ahead and ordered the Numinous Edition and Fungi of the Far Realm. I got both in the mail. Like I was opening the door to go to the doctor, and they were sitting on my porch. So I tossed the Numinous Edition on my coffee table because I'd already read the EPUB version of it, and grabbed the Fungi from the Far Realm and dragged that to the doctor's with me, and it's really good.
It's on the way. My copy's on the way. I'm very excited.
It's a beautiful book, but it has D666, which I believe is 215 different entries for different fungi, each one with like a watercolor painted diagram of that fungi and a description, including habitat, notes, mouthfeel, and aroma. And I love mushrooms, so it's like it was super good for me. But they also have. I realize I have this in. I bought this at some point on Itch, a Death Acid World module. I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah.
They just do a lot of cool stuff. So support the Melsonia Arts Institute, I think.
Melsonia
Arts Council.
Yeah. God, yeah. Damn, it was so close every time. Yeah. That's my closing thought on Metegorgos.
I think that it's a great module. It's surprisingly how short it is in its initial inception, but it gives you seeds for a GM to really build out. There's a lot of also consequence depending on how you handle certain encounters. There are some world repercussions that the book goes into, and it insinuates about what happens afterwards. So people who have a propensity for murder first as the solution will have a vastly different outcome versus those who are inquisitive or come as compassionate first, as we had approached it in this playthrough. So there will be some very interesting storytelling that comes from that. So definitely a very fun addition, and I think there is some read value there with what you can do with the world building and the lore that's in the back of the book.
Yeah,
it's hard not to. I want to talk about it, but I don't want to spoil it for players more than the live cast already provided some spoilers.
I have one more thing to say. I'm sorry.
What?
I just want to let you all know that I actually just backed another Troika based book on Kickstarter, and I hesitate telling you about it because I know what's going to happen after I tell you about it is 3 other people will also back a Troika based book on Kickstarter. This is Bones Deep, where you play a skeleton who awakens on the bottom of the ocean floor. You cannot swim. You don't need to breathe. You just explore the alien subaquatic world.
Fucking Mr. Bones got way too drunk on that yacht and just fell right the fuck overboard.
So that campaign ends in 19 days.
All these campaigns you want to support in 19 days. Yasma's Bed and Breakfast ends in 19 days.
But so we're not going to be able to run this, I don't think. At least not before the Kickstarter ends. They are currently $42 away from funding. The hardback edition costs $30. Also, they have some I'm not a dice goblin, but fuck, these dice look good. Anyway, Bones Deep for Troika. I've already said how much I like this system, and they essentially said, Hey, John, you like fungi? I like fungi. Cool, we have a book for you. What else do you like? Well, I like skeletons and underwater stuff. Okay, well, here's a book about skeletons underwater. Fuck off, Kickstarter. Like, I have a family to feed.
That's how that shit works, dude. Yeah.
Fuck.
Any closing
The
thoughts that you
algorithms.
had, Pashkis? This one's, I don't think we've turned the mic to you.
I got nothing.
That's-
It's cool remembering now
It's
a
like
lot
you
of
get
this.
to do the adventure twice.
I know. I
Yeah,
get more value out of this.
So
I'm sorry I didn't realize how blank my actual memory of this was going to be. I remember the mechanics of the D6 and going high and low. I was like, yeah, I'm sure I'll remember it. No.
So what I think we ought to do is Mr. Pashke is our recurring and so far favorite guest, and he
One that shows up.
yeah, and he more than that, man, value added, and
Of course.
yeah. I have to say, I think we should start testing games and substances. So we have you smoke a blunt before we do the next game, and then you try to remember as much of it as you can on the recap, and then after that we do angel dust.
Hold on. Charles Bernard.
Yeah.
Are you saying only Patchkey gets to experiment?
Oh no.
Okay, cool.
I mean, we have an actual show happening on 420, and I've been considering showing up with the 5 blunts thing I showed you, and just being like,
Wandering
"Oh,
Monster, now
excuse
banned
me."
in 17 states and 2 Canadian provinces.
Yeah,
Utah.
we are joking. We're not going to do anything illegal or illicit on air.
Stay
I don't
in
know what
school,
jurisdiction
kids.
I'm in.
Don't do drugs, or you might end up like us.
Yeah,
oh man,
it's true.
look at my eyes. Do you think that's natural?
Oh man.
So we do have.
Wait, real quick. Wandering Monster Power Hour. We all drink a beer shot every minute while playing an RPG.
Hold up.
See if we can make it to the
I
end.
have to say, none of you know Mr. Paskey here has a superpower that is quite phenomenal. No one can chug a beer like this man.
Wow.
I remember once I was at a party and somehow I found myself deep in the cup, which is usually not how I operate. And this is when I barely knew Charles, and we got into a beer chugging competition, and he absolutely smashed me. I was floored by how well you did, and you were being modest about how good you were at chugging beers. So apparently, and I don't recall this, I full on slapped you in the face.
You slapped me in the face.
Try to say no. You give yourself credit, and I try to give you a pep talk about how awesome you were, and you need to take credit for your accomplishments. Anywho, so don't challenge a man to a drinking contest.
Yeah.
So
Back
when
I
I
was
was in
young.
high school, I was kind of an asshole, as many of us have been, I'm sure. But I was a particular asshole to this one guy, Nolan Felder. And Nolan, if you're listening, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I'm sorry, bud. I was an asshole. But this is a very funny story, and I apologize for sharing it. I did a lot of your mom jokes to Nolan consistently and constantly.
Hilarious.
Because I wasn't very funny. And one day
That's not very funny.
nice. One day he lost his mind on me, and he was yelling at me, just tearing me up, and I slapped him. And he looked at me, mouth agape, and I said, "Don't talk to your father that way." And then went to class.
That is good.
I will say that we were friends after that moment. That wasn't.
Okay.
I did that, and
that's
yeah.
pretty fucking funny. That's a good one.
if we didn't end on good terms, I would not feel comfortable sharing that story. But
Yeah,
we remained friends long after that day.
Pretty good.
So, folks, coming up, we have a really great lineup of events. So, we have in 2 days on April 6th, also everything starting at 8:30 Central Time. We have a live play of Dungeon Plumber by Wayne Robert, and he will be joining us in the chat. So, that is a Diesel Punk Old School Essentials game that may involve hallucinogenic fungi, as we're talking about
Yes.
drugs. Followed by on Monday, April 11th, John will be taking the reins and will be GMing a live play of The Real Thing RPG, which is the official licensed Faith No More Powered by the Apocalypse RPG, which is released here from Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I'm from.
I am possibly the member of the cast who is most excited about that one. I'm an OG Mike Patton fan, and Faith No More is not my favorite project he's done, but solid project. So yeah,
absolutely, and it's been blowing off the chart. I mean, how successful the Kickstarter has been amazing. So we're excited to have that. So far, tentatively on April 13th, that Wednesday, will be a discussion where we discuss both Dungeon Plumbers and The Real Thing RPG. And then coming up on deck, the TBD is our live play so far, hopefully hosted by Jay Dragon, Jay Zelf, which is Yazba's Bed and Breakfast, which is, if you like Wander Home, that is kind of almost like a spiritual sequel to that. Beyond that, we also have in the works at some point, hopefully, Orkborg and some other neat projects. Again, if you have a project that you are preparing to bring to crowdfunding or a re-release or a release on itch, whatever form it is, and you would like us to do a live play and discussion, hit us up. We do at least a live play every other week, if not once a week, because we've been really burning the midnight oil currently. So,
and we, I think we will probably prioritize live plays over discussion. Maybe if we get to a point where we just can't offer a discussion on top of live plays, I think we're talking about starting maybe a blog where we can jot some of those notes down, but we will prioritize live play because I think that's more entertaining, and you get to actually see those systems and mechanics in action, which I think is super useful for people who are curious about playing something.
And on top of that too, if you have feedback as a viewer, we are a small group and we listen to you. If you have certain content that you would really like to see showcased or something that would be really important, tell us. We'd love to have your continued loyalty and to have you continue to smash those likes and subscribe buttons that you hear everyone talk about so much. Talk to us. We're real people.
So
I can't promise that about Bernard, but at least I know
he's a real man. Trust me, he is all man.
He is transhuman.
He is one man.
I've got the progenoid gland. We're working on the rest of it.
So if you're looking for us, congratulations, you apparently found us. You can find us on Twitter or Facebook at JuanMoncast. You can also follow us on our game company, Managed Heart Press, or Managed Heart Games, rather, at MHP_games. And of course, you can find Managed Heart Press, Managed Heart Games, A Gotta Try It, and this podcast at managedheart.press. If you really enjoy my personal worldview, I guess, and all the weird shit I say, you can find me on Twitter at Kaiju Poet, or you can find me at www.kaijupoet.com, where you can find links to everything I've written, usually on Amazon or on Godless, and you can even order signed books from me personally. So please check those out.
Yeah, and if you're trying to ferret out where I am and what I'm doing, then you know what, FBI, you can go fuck yourself. But if you're not the FBI and you want to know what I'm up to, you can follow me on Twitter at CRBernard, CRBERNARD, or go to tinyurl.com/Charles R. Bernard, all lowercase, and that will lead you to the big annotated list of my writing, including my novel that is out so far, some stuff I have in anthologies and magazines. I have a duology coming out later this year from Raventail Publishing, and more on the way. Mr. Servas.
Not as cool as the others. Look at them with their big fancy CVs and all those publishings. But I do editing and proofreading, content writing, and such. So if you are needing additional support for your RPGs, would like some live play, testing, develop, things like that, feel free to hit me up on those socials that are below. currently still working on polishing those up. I've been too deep in actually working on commissions and game stuff and live playing to focus on socials, but that will be more forthcoming. So do stay tuned. And then last but not least, our rear guard, the rhino with the short spear and 2 hats. How will people find you, Mr. Paschke?
They will find me by going into the woods, finding the tallest, oldest tree, turning to the left, walking for 12 paces. Then you'll have to dig. There you'll find a box, and that will lead you to the map.
And inside that, and at the end of that map is a key. The key opens a box in your heart, and Charles Paschke was in your heart all along. Okay.
Mr. Paschke on stuff.
or you could just go to his house and punch him right in the liver.
I was watching something that referred to that
the
secret was in your heart all along as yeah, that's right. This is a motherfucking Dumbo type deal. I thought that was great.
Friends, before we say any more stupid shit, thank you so much for joining us on this consensual journey we call Wandering Monster. It really does help you if you follow us and like videos. Like I said, we're here. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Find us. Give us those likes and subscribes, and it really helps us out.
It really does.
Super does. We are so grateful for you for tuning in. This has been Wandering Monster. The table. The man. Ooh, how do I get us off this boat again? This has been Wandering Monster, America's Test Table. I have been John Baldisberger.
I have been Charles R. Bernard.
I have been a tiny shrew kept in a golden cage. Also, my name is Ian.
I have been a figment of my own imagination.
We'll be back on Wednesday. Until then, stay safe, but stay scared.